In this video, we're going to look at template-driven forms and also ngForm, which allows us to basically group our fields together, and we can do things like validation. All right, so we have our empty template here, and we're just going to go ahead and create a form, and we're still using Bootstrap. So this form is basically going to have a name. It's going to be for a user. It's going to have a name, an email, and a phone number. All right, so let's go ahead and create a div here. Give this a class of form group. And let's see, we're going to put a label in here. This will be the name. And let's say input type equals text. We're going to have quite a few attributes here, but for now I'm just going to put the type. I'm going to put a class of form control, and let's just do that for now. And then we'll just copy this form group, paste two more in. This will be the email, and this will be the phone, and then we want an input. I'm sorry, a submit. So an input with the type of submit. We'll give it a class of btn success, and let's give it a value of submit. All right, so very simple form. Now let's say in our component down here we have a property called user. Okay, and we're going to just initially set that to an object that'll have a name, that'll be blank, an email, and a phone number. And then we're going to want to bind these inputs to these properties. All right, so for this first input here, let's actually put the attributes on a separate line. All right, so we have type text, class form control, and then we're going to put an ng model. Okay, and we're going to set that. I'm going to set that equal to user.name. Okay, it also has to have a name value, and I'm actually going to set this. That's going to be set to name as well. Not not user.name, but just name. And then we're also going to add an ID here of user name, and we're going to set that to ng model. And this is going to kind of just group. It's going to allow us to group all these different fields together. All right, and as far as validation, we're going to say min length, and let's set that to 2, and let's also set this to required. Now by default HTML5 will allow us to add these, and it'll give us a little pop-up if it's not correct, but we don't want to use standard HTML5 validation. So what we can do is in the form tag here we can add a directive called no validate, and that'll stop that from working so that we can implement our own. Now in the form tag here we also want to add a couple other things. We're going to create this ID, this F right here, and set this to ngForm so that we can group these together. And then instead of just doing a submit, we can actually use ngSubmit. And this will allow us to easily grab the values on submit. So we'll set this to a function called on submit, and then we just want to pass in that F value, and I'll show you what that does in a little bit. But let's first add the rest of the stuff to our inputs. So let's see, I'm actually just going to copy this and replace this input, and then this is the email. So let's do user.email for our ng model. We'll change the name to email. We'll change this ID here to user email. And for the rules, let's see, we'll just leave required, and we'll get rid of the min length. Okay, and then for this last input here, let's paste that in. This is going to be user phone. Change the name to phone, and then this ID here will be user phone. And then for the min length, let's do 10 because it's going to be a phone number. And I'm not going to set it to required. Now for the validations, if we just go ahead and we save this, let's look down here, see what we get. Closing div, unexpected closing div. Where is that coming from? This. What did I do here? Form group, that ends there. Form group ends there. So I have some extra divs in here, which I shouldn't have. All right. So right now, if we submit this, it's trying to submit to a function called onSubmit, but we don't want. What we want to happen is, since name is required, if we just leave it blank, if we click in it and we click outside and leave it blank, I want a little pop-up to show up here saying this can't be blank. Same thing if we put like one character when we have a min value, a min length of 2. All right, so what we can do is go under the first input. Let's go right here, and we're going to put a div here. And we're going to give this an ngIf, which needs to have an asterisk. So ngIf, and then what we want to do is set this to, let's say, user name. So we're grabbing it by this ID right here, username, and then it's going to have something called errors. So if we say username dot errors, and then we're going to put a question mark and then dot required, okay, because this should be required. All right, and then we want to put an and value and then say username dot touched. Okay, so Angular, when you click inside of it and then you click outside, it's been touched. Okay, and Angular has a special directive for that, so we're checking for that as well. So basically we're saying if there's an error, a required error, and it's been touched, then we want something to happen. Okay, and I'm just going to add a class to this div as well, which will be the Bootstrap alert, and then alert danger class, which will make it red. And then we can just put a message in here, and we'll just say name is required. Okay, so let's save that, and let's try it out. So if I click in here and I click outside, we get name is required. All right, if I put it in and click, then it's fine. So that takes care of required. Now we also want to do that for the min length, so I'm going to just copy this div. And instead of doing required right here, we're going to do min length, and then we're just going to change the message. So we'll say name should be at least 2 characters. So now if I put one character and click outside, we're going to get that error. If I fix it, then it goes away. Okay, so it gives us a nice elegant way to do client-side form validation. So let's do the same thing with the email. So for email, we're just going to do the required. So I'll just copy this right here, and then we'll put this right under the email input. And we're just going to change this to user.email.errors required, and then just change this. Okay, so now, whoops, if we put nothing in there, actually that's not working. Why is that not working? User email. Oh, I still have user name for this touched right here, so I'll change that to email. Alright, so now we can see we get email is required. And then for the phone down here, that has a min length, so I'm going to grab this div and go right here, and we'll change this to user phone min length, and then this should also be user phone, and then we'll say phone, or actually let's just say enter a valid phone number. All right, because if we put, just a couple numbers, that's not correct. If we put at least 10, then it should be all right. Okay, and we can put, spaces or hyphens, whatever, and that also works. And of course you could get more specific with your validations if you want. Alright, so now for submission. So when we submit this, it's going to go to a function called onSubmit. So let's go ahead and add that. And then since we used ngForm, what we can do here is we can have an object here, and it's going to have value, and it's going to have valid. And we can check to see if the form is actually valid. So if we go down here and we say, and you can handle this however you want, but I'm just going to do an if or an if else, and let's say if valid, then we're going to console.log the value. If not, then we'll just do console.log form is invalid. Alright, so let's go ahead and submit. We get down here, you'll see form is invalid. Okay, but if we properly do this, okay, and we submit, then we get an object with the name, the email, and the phone number. Okay, and then you can do whatever you want with that data. So that's a template-driven form. So in the next section, we're going to start to get a little more advanced. We're going to start to deal with services, observables, and then we're going to work with the HTTP module so that we can make requests to outside servers and backends. All right, so that's what we'll get into next.